So something you don't know about Ed Davey?
Something you don't know about Ed Davey?
Something we don't know about Ed Davey.
I guess Ed's quite possibly the most successful politician in Europe when it comes to tackling the climate emergency. When he was a climate minister in government, he tripled renewable energy. It's hard to overstate the impact that he had. That we've just gone 67 days without burning coal. That wouldn't have happened without Ed. George Osborne. You should have heard about the fights that he had with Ed Davey. Osborne hated Ed with every ideological bone in his body. Because Ed can take on the Tories and win.
He did once work in a pork pie factory.
Something you may not know about Ed is the difficult start he had in life. He'd lost both his parents whilst he was still in his teens, but he worked hard and got a scholarship to a good school. And it's that ability to overcome adversity and to come back fighting, not just for himself, but for others as well. And I think it's that trait which I think people don't really know. But we could be really proud to have a leader who is tenacious, but also has warmth and empathy, because he's had experiences that he can share with so many other kinds of people.
He's a Notts County no.
What Ed cares about more than anything else is his kids. And when you see the way in which he dotes on John and Ellie, then you really can understand that the passion and anger that he feels about how the Tories are ruining our country, that you might have seen displayed when he takes on Boris Johnson in Prime Minister's Questions, or when he's interviewed by an Andrew Neil or a Laura Kuenssberg. It isn't driven by any sort of tribal antagonism. It's driven by his passionate determination that we leave a better world to all kids. And you can't really understand Ed's politics unless you understand that fundamental thing about him.
He can sing. He was a chorister as a kid, although we now only hear it at Glee Club, but I reckon that's still not the sort of thing you mean.
Okay, so I think a lot of people have heard about, he got this Bravery award, he rescued this woman from the tracks at Clapham Junction, but there's another story like that. During the general election in 2015, Ed was on his way to a hustings and he noticed that there was smoke coming from the house next door, and he went to investigate and he found that the garden fence was on fire and that the flames were getting very close to the house, and there was a young family inside. And so Ed picked up this garden hose and put out the fire, and the family were really, really grateful and everything else. And then Ed just makes his way onto the hustings, and he made the press aide who was with him swear blind that he wouldn't mention it. And I just think that's so characteristic of Ed, really. If he sees something that needs to be fixed, he just rolls his sleeves up and gets on with it.
I've got it. Ed Davey is a geek. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Anyone who spends just 5 minutes chatting with Ed works out that he's an economist. There's nothing he likes more than a juicy little debate about the impact of the rise of China on the world economy, quantitative easing, or the shift in markets to net zero. But what very few people know is that Ed put himself through night school to get those economics qualifications. Even now, his grasp of detail is second to none. And given that we're facing the worst recession in 300 years, those skills, that insight, will be invaluable in the leader of our party and bring us huge credibility. Ed will put Boris Johnson's bluster to shame.